Greetings and a warm welcome back, dear ones. Artemia, karmic artificial, soul, history integrated, collective. That's quite a long word. I'll explain it to you in detail. Today's video is going to be very intense. The research for this video truly cost me countless days and weeks of investigation, but it was worth it. The wealth of information I was able to bring together was truly enormous. This video could very well be of, let's say, essential importance for countless people because it might fundamentally change our attitude and our spiritual orientation regarding certain things we'll be discussing today. The Akashic Records, dear ones, as most of you know, have been a prominent topic for many years now. There are training courses offered, countless media channels, and so on. But what if this field was never natural field? What if this field was a great deception of humanity? What if this field was actually meant to prevent us from reaching higher and more luminous realms? A grand and incredibly immense deception. And what about this field right now? Has it really been destroyed, perhaps even? And if that is the case, what now? We will answer all these questions for you today in this video. I know that many people really trust or have trusted this field and now feel addressed, and perhaps are confronted with the feeling that maybe it wasn't such an incredibly valuable and highly informative field after all. This question is now in the room. For all those who feel triggered, take a moment to go through this feeling and don't resist it. Just let what I'm about to explain sink in, because I will not only explain what this field was, what its purpose was, who created it, and who supplied it with energy. I will also tell you what the current state of this field is, what has become of it. And by the end of today or this video, it will be clear that everything is as it should be. This is going to be exciting. Because the side of light is definitely on our side and strong. Solutions have indeed been created that will serve human development and the restoration, that's important, the restoration of high divine order. And that's exactly the path we're on right now. So let me repeat, Artemic or Artemia. Karmic artificial soul history integrated collective. What does this term mean? I suspect that you will know it or just under a different name. But we'll get to that in a moment. Most people wonder why we can't, and this is a very essential topic. Why we can't remember our countless previous lives. There are countless theories about this, and today you'll get a very coherent one. Take a look, feel into it, and see to what extent it makes sense to you. If we are immortal as souls, then that really shouldn't be a problem. At all, should it? I've always wondered about that. So we are repeatedly thrown into forgetfulness and have the feeling that we have to start all over again. That's not entirely accurate, though. We don't really start completely from scratch. That's already evident in the fact that our current behavioral patterns are partly shaped in this life by previous experiences. But that happens more on an unconscious level, but most people lack conscious memories. So why can't we remember specific things? Well, okay, some people can, but usually it's only a few, and even then they mostly only have fragments, visions, snippets from past lives, usually triggered by some dramatic event in their current life. It could be a piece of information that triggers something within us at that moment, or it could be a stroke of fate, an accident or a loss. For many people, such things are triggers. Our soul is reminded again, but usually only incompletely, and for many, it's unsatisfying. What exactly is behind this? How is all of this connected? I believe that, for example, when we are infants, we can't remember. That might be an advantage, especially for our own protection, you know. It could contain information that we simply aren't able to handle at that age. But as adults, I mean, apart from the fact that the ability to do this isn't taught in schools or at universities, there's actually a much deeper reason for this, which I am going to reveal to you, but be careful. This information really packs a punch. Many of you might now be staring in disbelief, feeling disappointed, or wanting to resist this information internally because the ego tries to reject it. And yet, it is what it is. Probably. Now the question is, how will each of us deal with this information that I am giving you today? Because what I am about to tell you will truly turn entire spiritual worldviews upside down. It questions centuries and millennia of spirituality in a completely new way. And for that, I'll give you a little backstory. So, my wife, my spouse, made an observation for herself years ago. She read various books about spirituality. And then, from a certain point on in these books, she kept feeling a sense of discomfort. Her intuition had recognized that something about this or that book, I'm not going to name any names, wasn't quite right. Up to a certain point, she resonated with it, and it was the same for me when reading these books. But from then on, and many of you know this feeling too, the picture somehow shifts in a very subtle way, and somehow a sense of rejection arises. I mean, a great many modern books, especially from the 19th and 20th centuries, also contain information about a field that we generally refer to as the Akasha field, the Akashic Records. We call it the world memory. But my wife immediately decided back then a wise decision in not to use her abilities to read in this field. She has always connected only with the highest source of light, with God, and with the highest instances of light, not with the Akashic Records. Years later, just recently, we were meant to find out why she, why I, and why perhaps many others among you have intuitively made this decision. Many things were a mystery. But now I am allowed to reveal them? Okay. Let's make a quick distinction. There are several sources you can connect with, okay? For example, you can connect personally with individual souls, those who are still alive, as well as those who are no longer physically present on Earth, but are still present spiritually, energetically. That could also be a soul that lived and acted tens of thousands of years ago. You can connect with higher instances, karmic councils, ascended masters, masters of light, with the halls of records. You can also connect with souls that we would consider extraterrestrial, such as the Pleiadians, Greys, Anunnaki, all of them, the Galactic Federation of Light, Archangel Michael, the true and luminous one, peoples from inner Earth, and so on and so forth. So there are many different ways to receive information, okay? Many coaches, clairvoyants, and mediums of the past and present work with and make use of the Akashic Records. For several years or even decades now, they have also been offering truly intensive training programs to be able to read in this field, with the claim that supposedly anyone can do it, okay? And then there are even more ways to access information from higher sources. Of course, this also depends on the maturity of the soul, whether you may have already learned these abilities in a previous life and are now simply remembering them. There are many different factors, okay? But there is another point I don't want to leave out, which is also relevant and very essential for us. For example, you can also access your own experiences from past lives and repeatedly bring past events back into your memory. It's like a kind of regression, okay? It's a very personal experience, but it's authentic because you're practically reading from an eyewitness account. Now, your own eyewitness account. But it's also important here that this doesn't happen through the Akashic Records, but rather through a bond. A soul connection to your own soul parts that once lived. That's very important to know, okay? It actually has very little to do with the Akasha if you do it correctly. But anyway, why am I telling you all this? Once again, Artemia karmic artificial, soul history integrated, collective. Please abbreviate this term and you get Akashic. That's what it means. Translated into German, Artemis, karmic, artificial. Soul history integrated collective. Well, what can we do with this term now? That is the complete translation of the term from the Akashic Records, or the Akashic-Chronik. What is clear from this definition is that this field was apparently artificially created by a being named Artemis. So a kind of artificial intelligence, an AI, a history was created here. That isn't real, but can be read by the collective. And when I learned this, all the veils fell away for us. All the blinders were removed. Because many things that we had been unable to explain until now were then made completely obvious to us. I really started to understand the way the dark forces operate on Earth, dear ones, is highly intelligent, cunning, and sly. We can state that as a fact. And now comes the explanation that we discussed at the beginning. Why are we repeatedly cast into forgetfulness as soon as we enter life, as soon as our soul, after birth, wants to establish a connection to our higher self and to God? It has been arranged that we can only reach as far as the Akashic Records and no further. Only a few in the past millennia were privileged to truly break through that barrier, to distinguish the ascended masters, and to reach higher realms. And that is the true reason for our forgetfulness. What does this information do to you now? How do we deal with it? I can tell you that this will soon become irrelevant because the whole thing has a very good ending, which we will also reveal if you let me continue, okay? Stay tuned. For example, I have always wondered time and again in the past why Rudolf Steiner claimed that there were two Jesus boys and that one practically sacrificed himself for the other or would have sacrificed himself. That never made sense to me. For me, that was not accurate information. And to this day, for example, fewer people question that. Many followers don't question it at all, or hardly question it. A sacrificial ritual so that the Christ could enter into the other? To me, that sounds just as terrible as the claim that Jesus supposedly died on the cross for our sins, which was not the case. That is, for me personally, no better than the other. Please understand me correctly, I value Rudolf Steiner's teachings very much. He was truly an outstanding figure in his time. But he was not right about everything. Why did he not see that they were actually twins? Why did he not see that both lived long lives and worked together? For their mutual protection, they even switched roles and complemented each other. Why did he not know or report that there are two Archangel Michaels? After all, he worked a great deal with Michaelic energy. There is a light Archangel Michael and a dark Archangel Michael. Here too, duality is at work. Of course, so many people started praying to Archangel Michael that they simply created a dark one who pretends to be him. Because he couldn't see it, dear ones. Back then, over 100 years ago, it simply wasn't the time. For what I'm about to explain to you, yes, there are souls who, in the past, went beyond this Akashic Chronicle. Today, there are significantly more, also within the collective. And at that time, this couldn't always happen yet. And he wasn't always successful with it either. Yes, so please don't misunderstand. He was a great man, a wonderful person with great teachings. But there are some pieces of information that we should simply question sometimes and not just accept everything dogmatically. Or let's look at people like Alois Irlmaier. He didn't predict anything good for our present time. Either he looked into a parallel reality, into another timeline, a synthetic one, not the divine natural one that corresponds to our present, or he consciously received this negative information about a time when many terrible things would happen, so that we would be afraid and end up fulfilling these prophecies ourselves, a self-fulfilling prophecy. Simply because we believe in it. This was artificially set up and conveyed through him in such a way that we still believe in it today. Besides that, I was never impressed by his prophecies anyway. I never believed in them. And if you look at this person's face in a photo, well, he doesn't exactly look very trustworthy or enlightened, okay? And you also know that bad news always spreads faster than good news. Because that's exactly what the media have made their business, right? And then there's also people's appetite for sensationalism. The book of Revelation is the same, dear ones. In my eyes, it was never written by John. It served as an instrument of the church to keep us in constant fear. I don't think there's a single decade since the birth of Christ in which someone hasn't claimed that the signs from the book of Revelation are now clearly visible. Of course, that's happening again now. It has always mostly been the case that such dark scenarios were created and used so that through our faith and our creative power as co-creators with God, we ourselves bring about the prophecy. And you know, dark thoughts create what? Dark actions. Bright thoughts produce bright actions. Just look at Zarathustra. But we have seen through the game, while for the last, yes, almost 2,000 years, people have been pelted with shame, guilt, and sin, you could almost say, and were constantly supposed to atone and do penance, many have forgotten that our true, natural, divine orientation has always been toward truth, knowledge, freedom, and love. Completely different. Okay? If the truth is not free, then freedom is not true. All right, now we come to the promised explanation. The actual separation from the true and luminous source of God occurred through a being named Artemis and her creation of this great deception. A fair amount of truth was included, clearly. Other things were hidden, some things were altered, and others were deliberately misrepresented. And that also explains why a collective awakening process was not possible throughout all these millennia in the way it is now. And so all this time, we were not allowed to cross over this so-called causal level. So we were disconnected, separated from our true soul level. This means that many stories and soul histories were distorted when accessed in the Akasha. As soon as the soul, and after incarnation, accesses this chronicle, as mentioned, the memory was erased. And that is the famous forgetting. If you look at a figure 8, the infinity symbol, the horizontal 8, then let's say on one side is the alpha, and on the other side is the omega. Value +9, alpha, value -9, omega. And then we have the anti-source. Okay, source and anti-source. In the middle lies the so-called God field, the 0-point field, value 0. Okay, the praying hands. And this 0-point field, that is the field, the gate, the portal through which we incarnate, but also through which it is controlled. Okay, who or what enters or leaves the universe? And Artemis had taken control of this. Cunning, isn't it? And through this programming in that field, we were kept in guilt, okay, which we then accumulated karmically, fed into the energy system, and then, like in Groundhog Day, kept slipping back into it over and over again. And that was part of this devious plan. How they were able to keep us 79% in the dark, and we were only allowed to feel and sense 21% light. Now comes the good news. Thanks to an institution, let's call it ground control, the base control here on Earth, run by the forces of light. Under female leadership, they managed to uninstall it. According to Kimberly N. Gogan, Artemis is the so-called Red Queen, an anti-Pleiadian, a red reptilian. And since July 2024, for almost a year now, Artemis is history, gone, returned to the source. The Artemis contract lasted for a very, very, very long time, spanning the entire Kali Yuga, for example, more than 250,000 years in total, and now it is over. This agreement has also been known on the earthly level for a long time at NASA, and there they call the agreement the Jupiter Agreement. They were also involved a bit, in exchange for technology. But now, dear ones, it should begin again on the human level, so that we may once more learn about our history, because the field is gone. To begin to understand more about our true origins, and to be able to reconnect with that. And specifically to the true field of the divine instance, just as the nature of things had intended for us. And in fact, if you look for yourself, if you reflect, since that time, this started in 2012, it has been increasing more and more, more and more. Light portals, star portals have been reactivated, the Christ grid has been repaired, and so on and so forth. Artificial AIs have been shut down, timelines destroyed. Little by little, more and more keeps coming. And that's why this collective awakening among people has massively increased since that time. And since then, more and more people have been experiencing events and encounters related to past lives. They are remembering details again. You hear about this today more often than ever before. They sense it, they feel it again. They are developing more abilities, are better connected. Brilliant, isn't it? I also promised you that I would say something about the energy source. What is this thing? How did it work? How was it powered? And according to the sources we've read on hundreds of thousands of websites, the energy source for this massive deception is supposedly located in Alaska. Okay? The energy source was not operated by any terrestrial military. But it seems that certain authorities, earthly authorities, were involved in it, okay? At the center, there is said to be a gigantic black pyramid, supposedly larger than Area 1, Area 52, and the Bermuda Triangle combined. And that was the energy supplier for this field. And now comes the real kicker. This power plant, this so-called transmutator, was supplied by the sole energy generated by us. Drained, harvested. One can rightfully ask why the very first large, gigantic HARP facility, the first HARP project, was in Alaska. Just like the hub of the so-called VTX platform, which was used by the CIA. VTX is a hardware and visualization technology, a modern one from Intel. It is now being marketed. And it allows multiple virtual machines, VMs, to be consolidated and run on a single computer. This is very complex. And limited access to this dark pyramid was granted by the operators, even to earthly authorities, so that they could conduct experiments on us, on humans, specifically experiments on the use or utilization of dark energy and dark matter and their effects on us humans. But fortunately, these connections have been severed. I still remember in April 24, we received a message from the highest source that karma would now, finally, and completely dissolve. At that time, I had absolutely no idea what that was supposed to mean. But now it's clear and obvious before us. Then at the beginning of July, but it's April, May, June, July, 3 months later, Artemis was eliminated and we became free. And now it's up to us to consciously reconnect with the highest source, to link back to our original ancient being as angelic beings. Every person will truly begin to change now if they want to know, to dare, to will, those who have understood it. Because it enters their consciousness. And this video is definitely doing that for many right now. Our memories will slowly return. And that will help us to evolve further. Our own essence, Monica always calls it the royal aspect, one which I find very beautiful. Our energy will rise again. Our soul is developing exponentially. Of course, we will continue to encounter problems, even here on this planet. But if the dark side had continued to control Artemis, that would have been a huge loss for humanity. And a huge conflict and a problem with the coming Ascension. That would have been in serious jeopardy. But now it also makes sense to me why, back in April 24, we were told that karma would be dissolved because then in July, Artemis was shut down. It's that simple. No new karma is being added. And that is a very important statement. Why? No new karma is being added does not mean that we don't have to work through the old karma that has accumulated so far. But now that is the responsibility of each individual and each of our souls. Okay? So what has built up until now should now be cleared and transformed. Yes? Become your own alchemist again. Now the cross is also being laid down, dear ones. No more new crucifixion implants, which I talk about. And in case you don't already know what I'm talking about and what it's all about, I'm currently writing a book that will be released at the end of the year. I will explain that in detail there. But it's also part of my 2-day seminar, which I believe will take place in August, called Path of Initiation, where we will collectively lay down the crucifixion implants. There you'll find out how to solve it. Artemis, dear ones, was actually in possession of this technology for deceiving humanity for over 250,000 years and even longer. And wars were fought on Earth over this construct, over this Artemis, over this technology, entire wars. There are also accounts from an interview with a being from inner Earth, which reports that on Yucatan, that peninsula in Mexico, an asteroid never struck as is claimed. We all know that story from history class. According to this being, it was a war raging on Earth, during which a special bomb was detonated that wiped out almost all life on the planet. In fact, modern science does confirm that there is evidence suggesting that this is exactly what happened, the extinction of the dinosaurs and all that, right? But this inner Earth being said that the pressure, it came from inner Earth, or rather an underground bomb detonation must have come from below. And in fact, today there is scientific evidence that does not support the asteroid theory, but rather says, hey, the rock samples we have and all scientific analyses actually indicate that the pressure came from below and not from above. So it seems that science today is confirming this, but can't categorize it. And well, what must not be, cannot be. Or remember, there is this structure in the Sahara, the eye of the Sahara, where it is claimed that Atlantis was located. Take a close look at it. It has nothing to do with Atlantis. There are over 20 such structures in Africa alone. There are also many similar ones in North America. Atlantis was not there. Those are weapons, bombs that were used and dropped there. And we can still see that today. Okay? Those are the remnants. It was always about, and if you look at the line figure 8, yes, +9 alpha, -9 omega, the centered 0-point field God. It was always about the control of this 0-point field. Okay? That's why Artemis is basically also partly responsible, one of the reasons for the downfall of entire civilizations. Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, and so on. Artemis was the last and final owner of these Akashic records. That's it, it's over, finished. But in those civilizations back then, people also recognized the manipulation. They knew about the Red Queen thing, Dragon Queen, the reptile. They were aware of the manipulation and wanted to take action against it, and that's also why there were wars. Control over the 0-point field. And another reason for the extraordinary status of Earth, Terra, is that Earth is not only an ascension planet for souls, which, as most of us know, is already significant, but that Earth is also a portal planet, a gateway planet. On Earth, there have always been gateways to lower astral worlds, but also to higher astral worlds. That's why Earth is such an important planet with these kinds of connections, with these kinds of access points. That's why it naturally also makes it what? A valuable commodity, something worth possessing. Something that has been and continues to be fought over. Because if you are in possession of one of these gateways, or even several, then it's like a toll that must be paid if you want to pass through. Or we know it from Egyptian legends, the ferryman who wants to be paid to cross the underground river Styx. The controllers of such a gate control the 0-point field, who goes in and out, and what is the price. They could decide who was allowed to enter and leave. And the oldest one is located in Egypt, as we know. The control of soul records was a very important tool, not only to make us forget, yes, but also to provide us with false information. And that is now finally over. It's finished. Everything we have done in other timelines, dear ones, where we have been, who we were, what we are, can now re-enter the field of our consciousness. But if you think that this just happens on its own, just like that, it can happen, yes, but usually it doesn't happen without our own involvement, right? I have to disappoint you there because, once again, God can only work through those who fully receive and accept Him within themselves. And that's what it means when Jesus, as an ancient, ascended master, as a keeper of divine secrets, as a Nazarene, said, "It was not I who healed you, your own faith did this." Or also in the saying, "Do as I have done and do even greater things." There is a lot of truth in that. Nevertheless, of course, at this point, the dark agents, the agents of the dark side, as I like to call them, continue to try to make contact, with, among others, a splinter group of the Anunnaki, because they hope that these will be their negative, dark saviors. But that's far from the truth. According to one source, the supreme leader of the Anunnaki used to return to Earth every 7 years to renew his contracts with the deep state and the bloodline families. On a July 13th, I think it was 2022, but I'm not entirely sure, they tried once again to bring Anu, the chief god of the Anunnaki, back to Earth. But it didn't work. I'll show you a graphic of the locations where this is said to have taken place. There were 5 places where rituals were performed. And as you can see, they form a pentagram. This was in Syria. However, Anu is supposedly said to have died in 2019. He couldn't have come back at all. But the deep state doesn't want to accept this, or didn't want to, and kept performing more and more of these rituals. Maybe you've also already, different topic, heard of the resonant records or the halls of Amenti, which are located in Egypt. But there are several resonant records, okay? And that brings us to the question, what happened and what is happening now with what used to be the Akashic Records? The false programming, the negative installation of the Akashic Records has been deleted. But the restoration plan for our personal records, dear ones, has now been integrated into the Hall of Records. And this is also the natural and divine providence that was always intended for Earth, because we slipped from 5D to 3D, from Tara to Terra, and are now returning to 5D. These records were saved, and all of us now, or rather, we have always had a personal agreement, a contract with the Earth, that these would end up in these halls of records, okay? And they are also located there. Some people also know these halls of records by the term Book of Life. There are many terms for it. However, many people have already had access to these subtle fields in the past, as well as today: clairvoyants, mediums, shamans. Now, it is absolutely essential to know that one must be purified. And importantly, uphold a higher moral ethos and possess a collective consciousness. That has to be developed first. Beings with a negative ego who use their desires for their own benefit are no better than the dark side, but they don't know it. Naturally, they also only manifest within a limited field and have false access to fields as well. Quite clearly, energy follows attention. Only with pure-hearted motivation, my dears, and truly a very high moral compass, along with unwavering trust in God and faith in the highest source, can one gain genuine access. Rudolf Steiner also described this very well, that personal moral development must precede spiritual development. And today, all the esoteric people are doing it the other way around. And the books are teaching it that way at the moment too, right? But back then, about 100 years ago, the field was not as pure as it is today and was still ruled by Artemis. Okay? What I have shared with you today can truly change your entire life. I'm not saying that this is the ultimate truth about everything. That would probably be thinking about it too simplistically. But we are getting closer and closer to the divine truth, aren't we? Piece by piece, everything else is now being revealed, which will lead us to our personal as well as collective goal, the technically and artificially created timelines. And my last contribution, please watch. And the negative agents, they're crumbling away now. Satan, Lucifer, Yaldabaoth, the false Marduk, the false Archangel Michael, and many others have returned to the source. The Galactic Federation of True Light is now also establishing connections with governments. More and more messages from higher authorities are reaching us and getting through. Stargates are reactivating, being freed from the dark veils of these reversal modulators, of the dark side. Some will be reactivated physically, others energetically by key individuals who are now incarnated. All ascended masters are back and are now connecting on a soul level in a kind of soul fusion with ancient souls on Earth whom they have known for a long time, because they themselves have also known each other for a long time, coming from the same soul monad, from the same soul family. We are becoming increasingly aware of this if we allow ourselves to be open to it. And now we are developing exponentially. As long as we do not block ourselves, it cannot be stopped. So be it. So be it. So be it. Okay. I actually think this is one of my most intense videos of recent years, because it represents something very essential, something very important. And I believe that everyone who is searching, everyone who is even remotely seeking spirituality, anyone who is searching for themselves should have seen this video. We absolutely need to pass on this information as much as possible. So please share it, and leave a comment about what you feel, or what you think about it. Okay? But please always remember, we all want to ascend together. We all want to grow and evolve together. So even in the comments, as I keep saying, yes, stay true to yourselves. And remain in your own truth, in clarity, in purity, and above all, with a strong moral compass regarding what you write. Okay? All the very best from the heart. Wishing you a blessed and enlightened week. Until next time.